Gwilym, hello, mate. Where are you? Where are you podcasting from?
From not very far away from you, actually. We should talk more.
We should, shouldn't we? Yeah, because I'm in London, and you're presumably in
Seven,
your
seven
salubrious
minutes away.
headquarters. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We could have done it from your place,
Oh, why did we? Oh,
which we've
next
not
time.
done yet.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, one for the future, maybe.
Good to like your shirt.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it's just quickly whipped it out of the sleeper wardrobe because I thought I'd better dress up for this one.
Oh, Joe, you got costumes?
No, I'm being appraised after this. It's my annual appraisal, so I thought I'd probably ought to have a shirt on.
Not after a pay rise this year, then.
Thank you.
Ask me about my shirt.
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? There's no collar on it.
No, right. So this shirt, I whipped also out of my personal home wardrobe, but very early because I was cycling in, and it's not my shirt. It's my son's shirt.
It's going to be one of your children's, isn't it?
It's one of my children, and it's one of my biggest sons. He's about 30 kilos heavier and about 5 inches taller. And so I've decided that I look like an extra from a Robin Hood film.
Ah, yeah, with the shift kind of thing. Yeah,
It's a smock.
smock.
I'm
That's the
wearing
word.
a smock.
Yeah,
Yeah. There we go. So we dressed up anyway. So we dressed up, guys.
What's the badge you got on? You got a little badge you're wearing. I think I know what it is.
IP Inclusive Ally. I went to the Andrea Brewster's AGM this morning, and it's a sustainable badge, Lee. So I better not lose it.
Is it like wood? Is it cork or wood or something like that?
Wood, yeah, that's wood. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Proud.
Anything exciting happening in your life at the moment that we need to know about?
The smock. That's what I brought. That's my story. Yeah. That was it.
Albert's awake. If you're interested.
Oh, how's he doing?
He said, "Yeah, no, he's all right. He lost a little bit more weight than we would have liked him to over hibernation this time, but it's because it was quite a mild winter, so he probably was slightly more active in his little box than he would normally be."
So for the guests who may not know, this is Lee's bear. No, it's not bear.
It's a tortoise.
It's a tortoise.
Yeah, and our listeners have grown to love him over the last 4 years, haven't they? So, so he lost about 12% of his body weight. Should be about 5 to 8%. So but he's all right. He's out. He's eating. So he's all good.
Does it mean he woke up a bit and his metabolism went high, or
he was really normally you have to kind of wake them up and energize them, give him a little bit of artificial UV and all that sort of stuff. But no, he was ready to go. Put him down in the garden. Bang, he was off.
So maybe it's half away. I suppose. I mean, if I was going to go into hibernation, I would carb load big time beforehand.
Yeah, that's not the sort of thing tortoises do.
Now, can you imagine? Look at 3 months sleep. You'd have a lot of spaghetti to get you through that.
Yeah. I don't eat carbs, so I would be deficient.
You would if you're a tortoise.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Mate, we're meandering now, aren't we? It feels like we're going nowhere with this conversation. We probably ought to get in. So, hello, Martin and Neil. How are you both?
Hello there. We're good, thank you.
Hello.
Good. Would you, for the benefit of our audience, introduce yourselves, if you don't mind? Whoever wants to go first.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Martin Brassell. I'm on SEPA's IP Commercialisation Committee, probably better known as the chief executive of a company called Inngot, and we get involved in all manner of IP valuation, commercialisation, and particularly support for IP-backed lending nowadays.
Hi guys, my name's Neil Bellamy. I may be the first banker that you've had on this call. I'm not sure, but I've been a banker 30 years. I work for NatWest, and I head up the bank's tech, media, telecom sector, and been working for Martin for about 10 years now on all things intellectual property.
Cool. So you guys have got a great pedigree, and I know we're going to have a fascinating conversation about IP and finance. I think you are probably the first banker we've had on. Now, can you remember another banker, Gwilym?
No hand.
No. Have we ever had anybody as exciting as a banker?
That's a leading question. No, we have not.
Well, we did. We had a deep sea diver. That's almost as exciting.
Discovered a dead body at the bottom of the sea. That's arguably more exciting than anything.
So that's what you're up against, Neil. That's what you've got to match. Okay, if you're going to be our kind of archetypal guest.
Haven't had any accountants on then?
Oh, we haven't. No, we have had accountants on. Yeah.
Well, they're quite exciting, apparently.
That was that was a really cool podcast. I can't remember what it was about, but
Pattern box, certainly. Yeah.
But I remember it being more exciting than I was expecting, which is good.
Well, we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
So you've got a gig in front of you. Let's see how it plays out. So where do we want to start? Do you want to start, Martin? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Inngot and kind of what you guys do before we get into the meat of the topic?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is to really help companies realize value from their intellectual property, if you like, where it is. Because the thing that's always been difficult about the transactional aspect of intellectual property is that, generally companies want to hold on to it. They don't want to sell it because it's such an important contributor to their enterprise value. So the question has always arisen, how do you make the most of the investment that you've made, obviously with advice from good quality people, in creating a portfolio of intellectual assets, which are then driving your business's growth and development? So investors traditionally kind of get IP at least up to a point. They recognize that it's important because they're very interested in companies having freedom to operate and having, being able to present some barriers to entry to other people, and IP ticks those boxes. But I would say in our long experience of dealing with them, they're generally more preoccupied with the size of the overall opportunity, if you like, the quality of the team, whether the team have had experience of successful exits and so forth before. So IP is an important contributor, but it's not really quite front and center of those sort of transactions. So the real challenge that we've been working on for a number of years now, and I've written about extensively, is how you leverage the value of the intellectual property by being able to borrow against that value. And that's where really, I guess, Neil, our paths sort of first cross.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, I guess, guys, what's a banker doing talking about intellectual property? I've kind of been a bit of an evangelist in the banking community on this for a number of years. But I guess looking into the future, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys that the most successful businesses in the world are not really built on the Industrial Revolution. They're built on ideas and innovation and intangibles, aren't they? So, really just thinking about self-survival as a banking industry, if we keep only lending on tangible assets, we're not really going to have much of a business left. So that's when I crossed paths with Martin and thought, hey, there's something in this that we do need to start developing mainstream products and loans that do exactly what Martin was talking about there, which is leveraging and unlocking the value in intellectual property of all types.
Before we get on to that, and before I let Gwilym in, because usually what happens is once I let Gwilym in, I don't get a word in edgeways. So I'm trying to fire all my shots early. I do quite a lot of running in the morning on a treadmill, and I always look for something to watch. So I'm watching back episodes of Dragon's Den, believe it or not. Don't know why. I think it was on iPlayer, so I thought, I'll work my way through a whole series of Dragon's Den. Do you think they get it right in the questions that they ask around? They're always interested in patents, aren't they? And they always seem to try and link it to the valuation of the business, but there never seems to be any kind of maths or great sort of formula behind that. Do you think they get it right?
Well, I mean, I think that's a sort of good illustration of what I mean, really. I don't think that their view of the intellectual property drives their view in terms of what the business is worth in the way that it could or arguably should. But it's great still to hear them asking the questions, if only to sort of raise the profile of the importance of having good answers to those key questions. I'm sure a little bird told me a number of years ago that the Intellectual Property Office have worked quite hard with the producers of Dragon's Den in order to try and make sure that this rather important consideration was not completely overlooked. But I think they've now picked up the habit quite well. It is a question that pops up fairly regularly, which is good, But as I say, it's one of the elements, and the relationship to value is not really explored. Having said that, it's a little bit of a different proposition when you're talking about these really early stage companies that are probably not even trading yet for the most part, or only just started, and really being able to get a serious amount of funding into a business to help it grow. So yeah, I can see why they do it the way they do, I guess.
Okay.
And I know we're going to come on to talk about new initiative, quite exciting new initiative in the world of IP and financing. But before we do that, how have traditionally new startups been able to leverage their IP for business support?
Well, I think almost 95%, if probably not a bit more, of startups and scale up businesses fund via equity. So, putting the money in themselves, family and friends rounds, Dragon's Den you mentioned, venture capital. And I guess following on from that Dragon's Den question is that, I sit there and quite often think, well, I hope these teams, once they've had their offer of, equity from the Dragons for sort of 20, 30, 40% of their business, the hope is that they perhaps give me a call and Martin a call. Because some of these businesses, we could actually give them the money, probably more money than what the Dragons have been offering them for no dilution of their business. And because these Dragons aren't daft, they're investing in businesses that are actually quite well along the road. Actually, a lot of them you see, they're generating revenue, and they've sometimes got contracts, which is what you'll see them asking about. They've got patents, and they're just smart investors. They're looking to see where are these businesses and if I put my money in them, have they built a moat around them to protect them, and how far are they along their scale up journey? And the later along that journey, it's a safer investment for those Dragons, isn't it? And as I say, I look at a lot of those and I think actually
they look bankable.
They are they're increasingly bankable, and that means no equity dilution.
So tell us a little bit more about that then. So what does bankable mean? So you're suggesting they could just go and get loans and not sacrifice the business, yeah?
For your listeners, I quite often say this to founders. Simplest term, really. How do you know when you're bankable? It's really quite simple. If you've got a product that works and customers that are willing to pay for it, you're probably a right time to start talking to a bank about borrowing some money. If it's just an idea, if you've got a great product, that's probably still the equity stage. If you haven't got any customers paying for it. So yeah, if you've got a product that works, customers that are willing to pay for it, you should be talking to your local friendly NatWest banker.
Yeah, we should say there are other banks, but there aren't other banks at the moment doing what NatWest are doing. That's fair to say, isn't it, I think?
Well, I guess and this is where Martin and I have been working together on this. That they're still for bankable propositions unless you are perhaps got a track record, have got lots of personal wealth behind you. You get that trap about, well, if you've got no sort of tangible security that's backing you up as well, our secondary source of repayment, there was still, I think it's the Scale Up Institute still, is estimated there's a 15 billion per annum funding gap for these businesses, where they're just not accessing finance, loans to help them scale up. So that's kind of, it's a big hole we're looking to plug. But that's what we're trying to do.
Cool. So we've mentioned NatWest. Should we talk a little bit about the new initiative then, which as I understand it, it's lending to really encourage growth in businesses that have already got demonstrable IP. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you the 30-second pitch if you like. So yeah, it's for high growth businesses. So we're looking to support scale up businesses because they're gaining traction. Coming back to my earlier comment, they've got customers that are willing to pay, for their product. So if you're a high growth businesses and you've got some form of IP, we can lend you against that intellectual property. Martin and his firm Inngot value it for us, and we can lend up to 50% of that value. So it's a straightforward, normal loan. We do better terms for you as a high growth IP rich business because you are statistically proven to be a lower risk business, and you get better terms from us as well. In terms of security, we're not taking any personal security, which is really important to the founders. We're taking security a fixed and floating charge over the IP itself, so the owner can let the business stand on its own two.
So how does that work? What would you take if it was defaulted, if that's the right word, if you needed to kind of recover your investment? How do you take someone's IP? How do you leverage the penalty?
The idea of a charge is that in the event of default, it gives the bank the option to be able to step in and, if necessary, take over control of those assets. That's all set out within the lending agreement. In practice, what normally happens if a business gets into a bit of local difficulty, shall we say? Well, there's a very well established process of workout, recovery, restructuring, refinancing, lots of different things that can be done in order to try and help the business continue before you would ever get to the point where you were to sell off those assets on their own. And, in the course of lots of discussions and lots of research, really what we've tried to do is to take a realistic view of that process and bake that, if you like, into the valuation methodology that we've agreed to use. So, NatWest are not lending against a kind of fire sale value, if we can call it that, because it should always be possible to avoid a fire sale scenario happening. There's usually warning of trouble, and the monitoring services that we provide alongside the loan are focused primarily on the intellectual property and all the intangibles, the reputation of the business and so forth, as well as a few of the underlying fundamentals that the bank wouldn't otherwise normally, I think it's fair to say, be monitoring, so that if there are signs of trouble brewing, we like to encourage the bank to take proactive steps to work with the business to avoid things ever getting to that point. Because the really key thing, which I'm sure is obvious to a lot of listeners, if you rip the IP out of a business, you will not have a business left. 96%, whatever of the time, there won't be anything else that's got any value in it. And I think what's also really telling is, if we look at businesses that have not gone through this kind of assessment process, but have gone to the wall in the recent past, in a lot of the insolvency situations, we do see that the intangible assets, particularly things like brands, software, data and databases, the customer relationships, to the extent that they're transferable to anybody else, those are the only things that really get moved on quickly and for a decent amount of value. So, we're seeing increasing proof and evidence of the fact that if it does go down to the wire, then actually it's absolutely worthwhile the bank having a ability to take a controlling interest over those assets in order to effect a recovery. But, the vast majority of occasions, you'll never reach that point, will you, Neil?
Mm. Yeah, that's right. Your point there is that the business doesn't exist, without its intellectual property. Mm. So, yeah, it's conversations to look at the business as a whole, really. And, yeah, absolutely.
So I've told Gwilym in the chat that I've got one more question. Gwilym, I'm not going to drop you another chat message. I've got two, if that's all right. I have two more questions. Okay. So first one for you, Martin, and then I'll come with a kind of a related question for Neil. So we've talked about valuing IP. We've mentioned it a number of times now. How do you go about valuing the intellectual property in a business? And I imagine we're talking about all IP, are we? Patents, clearly, but brand identity, trademarks.
So a bank is going to be so the first thing to say, I suppose, is that intellectual property assets and other intangible assets have a habit of adding value to each other. And trying to unpick the value of one specific asset that's in general use within a business and separate it from another is quite a challenging thing to do, because you can't really separate out the financial inputs normally. So within a valuation environment that we're talking about here, as you say, we're looking at it in the round. We're looking at everything that the company has got, which we take them through our own process to help them identify. In terms of the valuation process, it works in this instance off a combination of quite well-established income-based methods. So we're thinking really about what is the economic benefit that the intellectual property is already creating in the business and is expected to create in the future. Obviously, always through the lens of, where has it been in the past? What does that tell us about growth trends, about traction, which is Neil's key point earlier. But we also, in this particular context, we do look at the level of investment that's been made too. So we consider the cost position, because I think it's relevant for a lender to understand whether there's real skin in the game. And just to clarify that point, one of the main reasons why a bank takes security, not presuming to speak for Neil for NatWest, but generally one of the reasons why a bank takes security is not just to have this kind of secondary exit route, if you like, another means of generating value, but particularly to have a degree of control over something of importance and value to the business in the business's own eyes. So that it acts as a behavioral influencer, if I can call it that. If the business gets into difficulty, the business is motivated to come to the table and work with the bank to work the situation, work the problem out, if you like. In a situation where you have no security and the borrower can basically just walk away, then they may not be quite so well motivated to do that. And if there is a significant amount of investment that's gone into building, researching, developing, and then also protecting and maintaining the protection on the intellectual property, then that, in the eyes of most businesses, most entrepreneurs and founders, that's a really important business critical asset that they're not willingly going to let go. So for that reason, we also look at and blend in an element of consideration of the investment that's gone into the intellectual property. But, the dominant thing really, because we're looking at how the IP contributes to cash flows, which are then going to be used to repay the debt that's taken on. So, the first port of call is always looking at the income position.
Brilliant, thanks. So the sort of follow-on question for Neil is, so why now for NatWest? What's changed in the world that means that now is the right time to be looking at this?
Yeah, we've been working with Martin for quite a while on this. And I think we all lived through COVID, and I'm not saying it was because of COVID that we did this, but it certainly sharpened the minds of people in the finance sector about what actually people valued and what businesses did well through that pandemic, and the companies that thrived, not only survived but thrived. And you sit there and you think about it, and those businesses that had tons of fixed assets and lovely buildings and machinery, and they all had a pretty bad time, didn't they? Fixed assets and tangible assets didn't do great when the world shut down. Whereas, software and data and ideas and creative industries, all these great things with patents and ideas, there is limited barriers to those businesses. They can operate even through those dark times and
Yeah, so an interesting little anecdote there is, I think that my staff saw more inquiries from the public for how do you get in touch with a patent attorney or trademark attorney during the pandemic than at any time previously. There was something about the pandemic that gave people the time and the freedom to be creative, I think.
Yeah, never waste a good crisis, perhaps is the answer to that. And that's where we came out the other side with this new loan. But so in this new world that we live in, new digital economy, new digital world, I think, as I said right at the top of the show, the best businesses in this world are built on ideas and intellectual property, aren't they? And they're the ones that I'd like to bank in the future. Cool.
And do you expect other banks to come on board?
Yeah, for in full disclosure, there are other sort of banks that are doing similar things on what's called venture debt, which is quite an expensive way of borrowing, where people, businesses are kind of like pre-profit, and it's a little bit of a hybrid between raising equity and raising debt. And they're really taking a view on intellectual property as a sort of a comfort value in the background. Whereas what I've tried to do at NatWest is bring it more into the the mass market, into the SME world with a much, so the lowest amount you can borrow is 250,000 with this loan up to 10 million. So it's a really low entry point. The valuation services of Inngot are very reasonable. They don't restrict people, to take part in this loan. And to be honest, guys, look, if other banks follow in, which they will do, I think that's a good thing. I think we need more people, more banks, more mainstream banks sort of recognizing patents and intellectual property as, inverted commas, real security. And the reason I say that is the really critical point over the next few years that Martin and I are definitely going to work on is the banking regulators to actually give credit, collateral credit to intellectual property. So, I'm sure SEPA will be interested in this. If the banking regulators say, do you know what, patents, I think there's something in this, you banks, you don't have. So at the moment, guys, if I lend against intellectual property, I have to set aside 100% of that loan just in case there's a bad debt. So it's really expensive for banks.
Right.
Whereas if I lend on your house or on a factory, it's more like 20% of that loan, 30% of that loan I have to set aside in capital. And I think we all know on this call that patents and IP, they're not worth nothing. They're probably not worth 100%. They're probably not worth as much as, no money set aside, but they're worth something. So there needs to be a conversation as a country with the bank, with the regulators to say, give patents, give IP some official recognition as collateral, because that not only makes it easier for banks to lend, it makes it cheaper for customers to use those facilities and more established as an asset class, which is hopefully good for patent attorneys as well.
I'm following a bit from Lee's question, why now? Because if you look at it in simplistic terms as a kind of a mortgage on your IP, then that's something that's been in the Patents Act. It's definitely in the 1977 Patents Act, mortgaging your IP. So it's an old concept in some ways, but as you say, things have changed, things have moved on, and suddenly we're in a sweet spot. There's also an interesting indication of how patents /IP are being spotted more and more as a kind of a proto-financial instrument almost. There's a beginnings of we think market work on that for 10, 20 years now. And I was actually going to ask you, Martin, we'll actually give you a chance to plug Inngot a little bit, to be honest with you, because obviously we've got the valuation side of things as well. Do you think that we're going to see more and more commoditization of patents in particular?
I think that's tricky. In the longer term, yes. In the near term, I'm not so sure. I think the main challenge is that intellectual property delivers value in particular contexts most of the time, and when you take it out of that context, it may not have a great deal of value. It may not have any value at all. So inevitably, if you're thinking about trading the actual patents, assigning them to other people, they've only really got value if they can be used by that other party, either to license on to someone else, you could do that, to enforce them against someone else, you could do that, or most likely to use them within their own business, or to underpin products and services and create competitive advantage, for as long as those patents give them the rights to be able to enforce that advantage. And so if you think about it in that way, I think if you have to dispose of patents in isolation, then you have to be quite selective and careful about who you market them to, partly also because, we know that you're disclosing quite a lot about your strategy. If, for example, you're a large corporate with a large and diverse patent portfolio, you decide to dispose of part of it, you're probably not going to want the open market and your competitors to know what you're doing in advance and to signal it. And patents have got this really interesting characteristic that they hold a tremendous amount of really important and interesting information on what the innovation actually is and enable you to do all these fantastic kind of increasingly AI-driven landscape analysis of where they sit and everything like that. But ultimately, they're still difficult to trade And also, why would you trade them if they're really the key to your longer term business value and your ultimate desire is either to float or sell your business? You're going to hang on to them. So I think the problem with the kind of whole marketplace concept is on the demand and the supply side, to be honest. And unless you had a situation where you had a really good supply of very high quality patents, how do you really interest the buyers to take it seriously? And by definition, so this is the real crux of it. How are you ever going to get to a position where you've got a really, really good high quality supply of patents available for sale if they're that important to the businesses that already own them? That's where I think the sort of the basic kind of market economics of it don't necessarily work so well. And I think also, just to add one further quick thought, IP delivers value because it's unique and special and different. Otherwise, it's not really IP, is it? And most of the things that get openly traded on these marketplaces that you can theoretically quickly realize value from are to some extent like other things that have already previously been sold. They're commodities to a greater or lesser extent, or you can compare them with other previous sales in a kind of meaningful way. I think we've learned the lessons from history that if you try and value one patent based on what a broadly similar patent sold for a few years earlier, you're on a hiding to nothing. It tells you very little. And I can quote examples, but in the interest of time, I probably better not. You probably know what they are anyway.
So you guys at Inngot, I mean, as I say, you obviously linked up with NatWest on this particular element, but more broadly, that's what you do. You look at the valuation, you try and work out how you can do it. There's a bit of AI sitting in there as well.
So we've used AI in order to improve our understanding of what aspects of particularly patents are important and aren't important from the point of view of realization of commercial value. But we don't actually use AI in the running platform, if you like, partly because if Neil asks me a question, which he might quite reasonably do, to say, so how have you come up with this particular value and this particular point score associated with these patents? If I leave it to the friendly AI box, I won't know. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not really explainable enough. So what we tend to do instead is we use algorithms that we know and we understand and rules-based systems in order to be able to deliver those results, because if we need to provide an audit trail of our findings, I can do that really quite simply. In the fullness of time, as everybody gets more comfortable with AI, I do expect that to change. But I don't think that the lending market, which is having enough fun getting its heads around an entirely new asset class, also needs the additional complication of trying to get comfortable with AI for decision making thrown in. I mean, question for Neil, I guess. I don't think you use a lot of AI in your credit decisioning at this point in time.
No, not at the moment. No, we don't like black boxes that we can't look into, and our regulators don't either. So
that's fair. And regulators bring me beautifully to the other question, which is again comes off some of your comments, Neil, in relation to kind of regulator support, governmental support. So you're trying to build enthusiasm in this. Are you seeing much support or interest from government at the moment in this area?
We are. I won't name names, but we're in the election cycle at the moment, so quite a lot of the politicians of all colours are calling into the CEO offices of the major banks, looking for policy guidance if they were to take power. And so I've been keen, and I've been telling Martin about pushing intellectual property and funding of high growth businesses as a policy point, really. And I think why is that important? I think it's got a huge, macro issue with productivity in the country. We've had really poor productivity for about a decade now, and last bit of surge of productivity came from sort of the mass, adoption of computing. We've had a decade of really flat and really poor productivity, and I think a lot of commentary, a lot of commentators, sorry, have been speculating that is that our lack of leverage and a lack of funding and attention that we give to patents and intellectual property, because you can achieve incredible amounts of productivity with intellectual property. I think Martin's got a great expression that the wonderful thing about IP is the more you use it, the more valuable it gets. It's not like a print press or a car or a factory where the more you use the tangible asset,
they wear out.
They wear out and they go down in value. So there's this massive productivity gain, and you look at these high growth businesses that are creating so much wealth for the country, and they're not built on tangible assets, are they, Martin? They're built on ideas that can be 10x or 100x, and they don't wear out. These assets.
I think also, if you think of politics with a small p, if you like, it is very helpful that as of a year and a bit ago, WIPO launched its IP financing initiative, and we were fortunate, both of us last month, to speak at the parliamentary launch event for the UK's IP finance journey report, which the IPO and WIPO asked me to edit. And we had the Director General of WIPO there, Darren Tang, making it very clear his level of interest and support in this topic. We had the AI and IP Minister, interesting bedfellows in the light of what we just said, Viscount Camrose, who was also very clearly supportive. There is now going to be a kind of, I'm not quite sure what to call it, special working group, task force or whatever, to help take this forward. And I think the level of enthusiasm and excitement that's been generated amongst the IP community and the kind of broader small p sort of politics community, really through seeing how NatWest in particular, there are others like HSBC, I'll mention them very quickly, but very quickly and then move on. But NatWest's offer in particular, the fact that it goes down as low as 250k, that really is seen as important and game changing, because immediately it makes this view of IP accessible to just so many more businesses than if you're trying to do what they've done in America and only use IP, insured IP on deals of an absolute minimum of $10 million and typically more like 50 million.
Because we are in a shop, aren't we, of SMEs? The vast majority of value creators in this country are SMEs. Yeah.
So observation, don't worry, you don't have to answer this one, is that I'm keen the government gets onto IP finance, but I'm also keen that they push innovation and creativity. And Martin, obviously, we've sat on various panels discussing that in the past as well, but that's not my question now, because we're looking at the clock. Just last question for you, Neil, actually. You mentioned that you're the IP evangelist at the very beginning. What converted you? What was your epiphany?
I could say Martin, but that'd be terrible. Actually, sat right next to me. I guess I've been born and bred in Thames Valley, actually, and so all my banking career I've been out there, and it's a lovely place to live and work. Commuted into London for a bit of career, but majority of the businesses on that Thames Valley, that M4 corridor. All the businesses I kind of grew up with and learned my trade. You had telecoms businesses, all the software businesses, all the big US companies came over in the beginning of the 90s and based there. But also, I'm on the doorstep of a lot of the creative industries from the West End, but also Pinewood Studios is right on the doorstep. And some of my best customers and most fun days as a banker, I've been out talking to businesses that are built on IP. I've had some great days out of Pinewood Studios, for example, with customers that are based out there in the creative industries, as well as, great telecom and software businesses as well. So I'm also, just to throw in there, I'm also a mentor and advisor for Imperial College. So I do a lot of work with Imperial Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of Imperial College. Yeah. So I meet loads of amazing businesses that are spinning out of our great UK universities, and it's it's a massive strength that we don't really appreciate in this country is how great our universities are, how world class they are, and how great they are at creating patents and IP. And so I get quite a lot of exposure to that in my role as a sort of mentor.
Well, that was quite an evangelistic
There you go.
answer.
I'm in.
You nailed it, mate. Nailed it. We're getting towards the end, and I know Gwilym's got a hard stop, so we've got about 4 minutes left. He does this to me all the time, pushes me right up to them. So just one. Well, it's a two-part question for both of you from me, and then we'll wind up. So we got two sorts of listeners on the podcast. We've got lots of sorts of listeners, but I think the two sorts of listeners we have for this one is obviously our members, patent attorneys, and we do get quite a lot of kind of inventor, creative people who listen to the podcast. So what would be your kind of big takeouts for either of those two communities? If you want the patent attorney profession to take something away from this, what would it be? If you want the inventor community to take something away from this, what would it be?
Want me to go first, Martin?
Yeah.
I mean, I've bumped into quite a lot of your members. Well, I've been out sort of pitching this out in the market, and I guess my message to your members is, hopefully this is a great thing that you can have in your toolbox when you're talking to your clients. Yes, you're going to be talking about great advice in terms of how to protect your patent and register it correctly, and all those great things that patent attorneys are doing. And my takeaway for them would be, do you also know, client, that you can also leverage, you can help grow your business, take it to the next level by speaking to someone like NatWest. And I think I've really seen an uptick in my local bankers getting to, starting up conversations with patent attorneys in their local towns and cities, doing joint events together, bringing our clients together. Absolutely. It's been really great. And they're businesses that are, we don't, as bankers, we haven't traditionally seen a lot of, they haven't been borrowing off us, and it's a whole new group of client base that is exciting to get together with. And so, for the patent attorneys, use it as another tool in your kit bag for advice for your clients. And your creatives that are speaking, we're talking to quite a lot of businesses already that are, the IP that they've generated is music content, is gaming content that we're looking to lend against. So the relationship of those types of IP and to revenue streams can be quite strong, actually. So
wow, that's food for thought, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the IP then is really directly revenue generative, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it's it's finished works. It's not just the IP is the product. So for the entrepreneurial growth businesses, I suppose the main point is, I can't think of a better incentive for most of these companies to really take IP seriously and make sure that they do have an effective strategy and effective protection, than realizing that actually they can borrow against it if they do the right thing, for their businesses. And the form that the IP protection and the IP strategy will take is going to vary depending on sector, business maturity, what they can afford and everything. So, I'm sure everybody would be encouraging them to take a proportionate approach. Certainly, just because a portfolio happens to be extremely large, for example, does not necessarily mean that it's high quality or well managed. The message I suppose I would send is we can spot that. But I think for the purposes of particularly, I think the patent professionals, it really does make a difference if the quality of the rights and the quality of the strategy affect both the amount of value that we find in absolute terms, and also what proportion of that value we can recommend reasonably to NatWest that they should consider as a loan to value ratio. So there's a clear incentive there to take good, timely advice, because all of these things will add into a more bankable proposition, I guess.
We always end off with a final question. but Lee normally puts to me, and then you get a chance to think how you'd answer it. But I get the honour of picking that question today and starting off with Lee. So as I said, Neil, you became an evangelist of IP. Lee, if you could become an evangelist to something, what would it be? I think I know what the answer is, but we'll see.
So I've already been at it various times in my life, Gwilym, and I would immediately go back to doing it again. I would be an evangelist for apprenticeships, and the role that they can have in making kind of the professionals of the future. I was an apprentice plumber. I've not done too bad, and I think it was the best start I ever had in life. So I would be evangelical about the role of apprenticeships.
Well, a good, sensible, and I'll have to rethink mine now. Damn it.
Yeah, I'm normally a bit more upbeat than that, aren't I? But
that was so ethical, Martin. What? Come on, then. What about you?
Oh, well, I might just be an evangelist, full stop. I don't know. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, I'll stick with the intellectual property. Just really evangelizing for the fact that it really has value, and that value needs to be understood and appreciated.
Thank you very much. Neil, you obviously can't do IP, not only because you did it before, because it's just been taken again.
I get this. So if I can do a second evangelist topic, I think I'd evangelize over the prospects for the country in terms of playing to our strengths. So I mentioned earlier on about realizing this country's great strengths in its universities. I think we probably could have a rebirth, if you like, of what we're good at as a country and evangelize over that and play to our strengths. So our universities, our language, our culture, our creativity, and our great ideas that we could get behind and evangelize over that.
I'm smirking inwardly only because I know this hasn't gone the way Gwilym was expecting it to. It's come on in, mate. What have you got up your sleeve?
Yeah.
I was going to say riding a bicycle, but I can't now because everyone's gone all evangelical. I'm no okay. Positive.
That's very sustainable.
Sustainable, admittedly, but only because you can stop at cafes and not have to worry about parking. So it's not that sustainable. I'll be more sensible. Technical education, actually. So kind of following on from Neil, I think that's something that we've got huge talent for in the UK and we're not seeing enough of. And the benefits I've had from having a really good science education, not for everybody, but I feel like it's become something just for geeks and no one else. And that really upsets me because I think in going forwards, our greatest intellectual assets are probably going to come out innovation and creativity. And that's science is a huge part of that. So that's my grown-up answer, but really it's bikes.
Thanks, mate, for bringing us down to earth with your evangelical wisdom about cycles. That brings us to the end, really. Martin, Neil, thank you so much for coming on and sharing an insight into the world of IP valuation, the ability to financial business through the intangible assets as well as the tangible assets that you might have. I think you've made what could potentially be quite a dry subject engaging and interesting. So thank you for that. So much better than the accountants, but don't tell them.
I won't tell them, Lee, don't worry.
Thank you both. Gwilym, I will see you on the next one. But I have to close with the same statement every time now it's in my contract. And that's that if you've listened to the podcast and you've enjoyed it, and why wouldn't you, then pop us a little review on the podcasting platform of your choice. And then more people will find us and more people will find out about this kind of amazing little thing that we do. Evangelizing, that's the word, isn't it? Evangelizing about IP on 2IPs. Thanks all.